Hello everyone, thank you all for listening in. I'm Naveena, a postdoctoral fellow at the Harvard Center for Research on Computation and Society. I'll be talking about my research on how people respond to denials or other adverse outcomes in public services, and what these experiences mean for how we as researchers should think about algorithmic decision-making. This is work that I did with collaborators at Harvard University and Georgetown University. The study was focused on the context of housing assistance, an essential public service to ensure access to housing and housing stability. Given limited resources for housing, public services make decisions about who to prioritize for assistance. And algorithmic tools are increasingly being developed to help with this. For example, the World Bank is developing machine learning tools to decide which homes in an area should get resources for climate resilience, to be used by governments across the world. Algorithms are also increasingly being developed for public service agencies in the United States to prioritize people for housing assistance. Research in HCI and CSCW has shown that, especially in the context of housing assistance, client autonomy and agency are important to center in the design and deployment of data-driven tools. Ultimately, clients should be able to make informed decisions and advocate for the resources they need. One component of responsible AI that's aligned with this notion is the contestability of algorithmic decisions. That is, the ability to challenge a decision made by or with an algorithmic tool. This safeguard has received increasing attention in policy spheres across the world. HCI research has also explored this idea from theoretical and experimental angles, and has noted how responses to negative experiences with algorithmic tools can vary based on sociopolitical contexts. So amidst these questions of what designing for contestability of algorithms really means, we saw that there's much to learn from how people already contest decisions in public services now. We asked the following research questions. First, how do marginalized communities currently navigate denials of housing assistance? Again, looking at context without algorithms, but with a view to understanding existing resources and barriers. Then we asked what factors mediate communities' ability to achieve desired decisions. And then, drawing on our findings, we ask how might algorithmic decision-making processes support people in navigating adverse outcomes? We answered these questions in two contexts, the urban Northeast United States and rural South India. This is because we wanted to further a more plural understanding of contestability, while also contributing robust, transferable insights. We conducted interviews with 44 stakeholders in housing assistance across the US and India. In terms of stakeholders, we interviewed applicants accessing these services. We also interviewed the public service administration staff who administer these services. And we also interviewed intermediaries such as lawyers, social workers, NGO workers, some of whom were from or had affinities with the communities they worked with. We focused on a number of different interactions that applicants might have with public services, from applying to appealing decisions or reapplying. These processes were shaped by different power dynamics in each context which we attended to, including race and immigration in the US, or caste and rurality in India, or income and housing instability in both places. Research has established that making decisions transparent through information like explanations is important for contesting a decision. However, our findings made clear that explanations of denials or the right to appeal were insufficient to actually contest a decision. One reason was the high emotional burden of navigating denials. For example, many participants across both contexts discussed the mental and time burden of housing instability, or they talked about the legal-sounding nature of denial letters, or the intimidating nature of appeals processes. And so it was often relatively more well-resourced applicants who were able to appeal a denial. Another reason is that even if applicants understood a denial, there might be apprehensions around contesting decisions, and this differed based on specific power dynamics. For example, in the US context, applicants from immigrant communities did not always feel they had the right to contest decisions. For example, as one applicant said, "It's not what I do, like to stir up trouble with the law. I'm an immigrant. This is not my country, and if they can help me, great. But if not, I respect that." In the Indian context, the difference in power and caste location of applicants versus public service administrators was high, and though many applicants had the desire to contest decisions, they were uncertain about their ability to do so. For example, one applicant explained her hesitance. "Unlike people who have studied, we can't speak well or courageously." Finally, even if applicants knew they could contest a denial, specialized knowledge may be required, such as knowledge of legal defenses. So then, what did enable contestation for the most vulnerable applicants? We found that it was the work of accompaniment. Accompaniment is a concept developed by Paul Farmer, a physician and medical anthropologist, in the context of global health. It is the open-ended work of supporting people in navigating violent social systems. And so intermediaries such as social workers, NGO workers, and lawyers provided navigational support. This could include help with applying to public services, keeping track of application status, or developing legal defenses. Intermediaries also helped address fear of contestation by helping applicants understand the benefits of appealing, or accompanying applicants on meetings with public service administrators. Intermediaries also advocated for applicants if public service administrators were not being responsive or accessible. They also leveraged their legal knowledge to frame appeals in ways that were legible to public service administrators. Ultimately, accompaniment also enabled a sense of empowerment and dignity in navigating the bureaucracy of social services. As one applicant explained as to why she would have preferred having a lawyer for her appeals process, she said, "If I wouldn't have left with the voucher, I would have at least left with my dignity and my self-worth." But despite their important role, there were challenges in getting in touch with intermediaries. This was especially true in the United States context, while in the Indian context, NGO workers could work with entire villages and go door to door to build relationships with families who were applying for housing schemes. This is also why it was important that the idea of accompaniment was baked into the processes and structures of public services. That is, there were cases where public services themselves did the care work of ensuring the best possible outcome for applicants. For example, processes offered opportunity for providing additional information before a denial was finalized. For example, to make clearer decisions on eligibility, applicants were asked to provide details on mitigating circumstances around their criminal records in the US context. Or in the Indian context, applicants could be considered for different parcels of land if their original request could not be fulfilled. Workers also used their discretion to help applicants attain better outcomes. For example, one housing authority staff gave applicants extra time to respond to important mail if she knew they were at a shelter, many of which don't check mail often. So, to go back to the question of how to make contestation of algorithmic systems more accessible, these findings inspire a number of takeaways for approaching the design of algorithmic decision-making processes. First, existing care infrastructures need to be strengthened. There should be greater resources for intermediaries, and future work could consider the role of social and technical pathways to better connect applicants to intermediaries when necessary. At the same time, while the effect of information is limited, it's important to consider what explanations and other information provided alongside an adverse outcome could help achieve. This information, perhaps provided through a third-party system, could support some of the specific actions needed to appeal, such as raising awareness of legal defenses that may be applicable to someone's scenario. Similarly, centering accompaniment can help us think about the review of algorithmic decisions differently. Per work in HCI and policy, reviewing an algorithmic decision is supposed to allow applicants to have more influence in the final outcome. But we saw how accompaniment could be important for actually exerting this influence and feeling more empowered. So again, future work on designing review processes could consider how applicants could connect to intermediaries and how review processes could incorporate some of the work that intermediaries do. Finally, our findings also showed that it is important to design algorithms and decision-making processes to address process-oriented harms in addition to outcome-oriented harms. For example, algorithms could prompt for more information if cases are too close to a decision boundary, rather than only focusing on what the applicant can do after a denial. And with that, thank you for listening, and please consider reading our paper where we go into these ideas in much more detail.